Picture a Viking. Filthy, brutal, a horned helmet, an axe, a burning village behind him. Now throw all of that away, because almost none of it is true. They never wore horns. They were, for their time, unusually clean. And they were not just raiders. They were the greatest explorers and traders of their age. Almost everything you know about them was invented by their enemies and later by Hollywood. These people reached North America 500 years before Columbus. They traded in the markets of Baghdad. They founded the nation that became Russia, ruled a chunk of France that we still call Normandy, and put a dynasty on the throne of England. 3 continents, and we remember them as savages who only knew how to burn things. So why the lie? Because the people who could write, the Christian monks of Europe, were the exact people the Vikings raided. Of course, they described them as demons from the sea. The Vikings themselves left almost no written history at the time. For 1,000 years, we only had their victims' side of the story. This is the real story of the Vikings, where they actually came from, how a few boats of northern farmers terrified all of Europe, how far they truly sailed, and the strange, quiet way their age ended, not with a defeat, but with a baptism. Start with the day the myth was born. The Viking Age has a start date, the 8th of June, 793 AD. Longships appeared out of the sea at Lindisfarne, an island monastery off the coast of England, undefended, rich and holy. The Norse stormed it, killed or enslaved the monks, and took the treasure. To Europe, it was as if the wrath of God had arrived by boat. But why did they suddenly explode out of Scandinavia? Not because they were bloodthirsty, it was land. The fjords gave them very little farmland. Families had many sons, and only the eldest inherited. A young man with no land and a fast boat had 2 choices: stay poor or go and take a fortune from the soft, rich, undefended lands to the south. Thousands chose the boat, and they had a secret weapon. Not the axe, the ship. The longship was one of the finest machines of the entire medieval world. Light enough to carry, shallow enough to sail up a river a few feet deep, and strong enough to cross the open Atlantic. It could appear anywhere, strike and be gone before an army could gather. No one in Europe had anything like it, and they sailed that ship across open ocean with no compass, centuries before Europe had one. So how did they not simply vanish into the Atlantic? They read the sun, the stars, the color of the water, the flight paths of birds, and the movement of whales. They may even have used a crystal, a sunstone, to find the sun's position through thick cloud. They navigated a blank grey ocean using nothing but the world around them and a memory of the sky. And they were not illiterate either. They wrote in runes, sharp angular letters designed to be carved into wood, bone, and stone. Thousands of rune stones still stand across Scandinavia, raised to remember the dead. And it is from those stones, in their own words at last, that we get the other side of the story the monks never told. At first, they came for a summer and left. Then they realized the kingdoms of Europe were weak and divided, and they stopped leaving. Raids became invasions. In 865, a force the English called the Great Heathen Army landed in England, not to raid, but to conquer. And it very nearly took the whole island. They overran almost every English kingdom. Only one, Wessex, under a king named Alfred, survived and fought them to a standstill. The result was a divided England. Half of it lived under Norse law, the Danelaw, and to this day, hundreds of English towns and thousands of English words are Norse. When you say sky, or knife, or window, or the word they, you are speaking Viking, and their warriors earned the fear. The most famous were the berserkers, who worked themselves into a battle trance so extreme that they reportedly felt no pain, bit their own shields, and threw themselves at the enemy like animals. Our word berserk comes straight from them. Whether it was rage, ritual, or something they drank, no one is certain. But an enemy who does not seem to feel wounds is a genuinely terrifying thing to face. And not all of them were men. For over a century, archaeologists held up one grave as the perfect Viking warrior, buried with a sword, an axe, arrows, and 2 war horses. In 2017, DNA testing revealed the warrior was a woman. The sagas had always spoken of shield maidens, women who fought, and scholars had dismissed it as myth. The ground proved the sagas right. By now, the raids had grown into something no monastery could imagine. In 845, a huge Viking fleet sailed up the Seine and besieged Paris itself. The king of the Franks did not fight them. He paid them a fortune in silver to leave. It worked for exactly as long as the silver lasted and taught the Vikings a lesson. Kingdoms would pay simply to make them go away. And it is here we have to be honest about the darkest part of the Viking economy. It ran on slaves. A huge share of their raiding was to capture people, called thralls, who were sold across Europe and the Islamic world, or worked to death at home. The Vikings were explorers and traders and settlers. They were also one of the largest slaving operations of their age. Both things are true, but raiding is only half the Viking story, and the smaller half. Turn east, and you find a completely different Viking, a trader. The Norse who went east, called the Russ, were not mainly warriors. They were merchants, and they built trade routes down the great rivers of Eastern Europe that stretched all the way to the richest empires on earth. They traded all the way to Constantinople and the markets of the Islamic world. Tens of thousands of Arab silver coins have been dug up in Scandinavia because the Norse sold furs, amber, and slaves to the wealthy south and carried the silver home. A Viking from a cold fjord could end his career having stood in the markets of Baghdad. We even have an Arab diplomat's detailed, astonished description of meeting them. And these Eastern Vikings did something the raids never did. They founded a country. Norse leaders came to rule the Slavic peoples along those rivers, based in cities like Kiev and Novgorod. That state, the land of the Rus, is the direct ancestor of both Russia and Ukraine. The largest country on earth is named in the end after a group of Vikings. Some went further still. The emperors in Constantinople, the surviving Roman Empire from earlier in this series, were so impressed by these giant northern warriors that they hired them as their personal bodyguard, the Varangian Guard. Vikings protecting the throne of Rome 1,000 miles from home. Some of them carved their names in runes into the marble of the Hagia Sophia, where you can still see them. Now turn the other way west into the open ocean, and you find the greatest Viking achievement of all. Because while some raided England and others traded with Baghdad, others simply sailed into the empty Atlantic to see what was there. And what they found rewrote the map of the world. First, they found Iceland, empty except for a few monks, and settled it. And there they did something remarkable. With no king, the Icelanders founded a parliament, the Althing, in 930, to make laws and settle disputes. It is often called the oldest still functioning parliament in the world. These supposed savages built a working democracy on a volcano. From Iceland, a man named Eric the Red, exiled for killing people, sailed further west and found a giant frozen island. To lure settlers to this bleak place, he gave it the most optimistic name in history, Greenland. It worked. Norse colonies survived there for centuries, and from Greenland it was just one more jump into the unknown. Around the year 1000, Eric the Red's son, Leif Erikson, sailed from Greenland and landed on the coast of North America. 500 years before Columbus. They called it Vinland for the wild grapes they found. Europeans had reached the Americas half a millennium early, and for centuries everyone assumed it was just a legend. Then, in 1960, archaeologists dug up the remains of a Norse settlement on the northern tip of Newfoundland, in Canada. Longhouses, a forge, Norse tools. The legend was true. There is now hard physical proof that Europeans lived in the Americas around the year 1000. The Vikings really did discover America. They just could not hold it. Too few men, too far from home, and hostile locals. So who were these people really, when they were not raiding or exploring? Mostly farmers. They were famously clean by medieval standards, bathing weekly and carrying combs, which horrified other Europeans who thought that was excessive vanity. Their women could own property, request divorce, and run farms while the men were away. More freedom than most European women would have for another 1,000 years. Their religion was unlike any other. Odin, Thor, and the rest were not all-powerful and eternal. They were doomed. The Norse believed that one day, at Ragnarok, the gods themselves would fight a final battle against the giants and lose. The world would end, and the gods would die. Imagine worshipping gods that you know are going to be defeated. It made courage the highest virtue. If everything ends anyway, All that matters is how you face it. And they believed that a warrior who died bravely in battle was carried to Valhalla, Odin's great hall, to feast and fight every day until the end of the world, when they would march out beside the gods for that final, hopeless battle. Dying well was not the end. It was an invitation to the greatest hall there was. That belief made them very hard to frighten on a battlefield. We even have an eyewitness. An Arab diplomat named Ibn Fadlan watched a Norse chieftain's funeral on the Volga and wrote it all down. The dead man was placed in his ship with weapons, animals, and food, and then the whole ship was set on fire so that the smoke would carry him to the next world in an instant. A great warrior did not rot in the ground. He left this world in a burning ship on his way to Valhalla. Because they believed the gods would die, they did not fear death the way Christians did. What a Viking feared was being forgotten. Cattle die, one of their poems says, kinsmen die, but a good reputation never dies. So they sought fame through daring deeds, wild enough to be turned into a saga and remembered forever. Their entire culture was built on the terror of being unremembered. By now, Europe had learned it could not beat them, so it started absorbing them instead. In 911, the King of France gave a band of Vikings a whole province just to stop them raiding Paris. They settled, took up French, became Christian knights, and their land was named for the Northmen, Normandy. And those Norsemen turned Frenchmen were about to change history one last time. There was one last great Viking, Harald Hardrada, King of Norway, a giant of a man who had served in that Varangian Guard in Constantinople and fought across half the world. In 1066, he sailed for England with a huge army to seize the throne, the last true Viking bid to conquer a kingdom. He landed in the north, and at first he won. The English king marched north and destroyed him at Stamford Bridge. Harold was killed, and it is often said this was the day the Viking Age ended. But watch the timing, because it is one of history's great ironies. Just 3 days later, on the south coast, a different fleet was landing, the Normans. The English king, exhausted from beating one Viking, now had to race south to face another. In 1066, the Duke of Normandy, a descendant of Vikings, crossed the sea and conquered England at the Battle of Hastings. William the Conqueror, the English monarchy, the language, the entire course of British and then world history, was reshaped by the great-great-grandchildren of Viking raiders. The Vikings conquered England twice, once as raiders and once wearing French armor. And here is how the Viking Age actually ended. Not with a great defeat, with a baptism. Over the 10th and 11th centuries, the kings of Scandinavia converted to Christianity, and with them, their peoples. A Christian king did not raid monasteries. He built them. The raids stopped. The old gods were set aside. The Viking Age did not die on a battlefield. It was quietly, deliberately switched off. So there is the answer to the puzzle we started with. The Vikings were remembered as mindless savages because the only people writing were the monks they robbed, and because a horned helmet myth is simply more fun than a merchant with a set of scales. The truth is stranger. They were explorers, traders, settlers, and lawmakers who touched 3 continents, and they never fully left. They are in the name of Russia and the province of Normandy, in the English language and the English throne, in the Norse blood spread from Canada to Constantinople. The most feared raiders in history became the citizens of the most peaceful, trusted nations on earth. The Vikings did not lose. They simply grew up. But the Christian, castle-building Europe that finally tamed the Vikings was about to enter its own strange and violent age. An age of armored knights, towering castles, holy wars, and a plague that would kill half the continent. The 1,000 years we call, often unfairly, the Dark Ages. It was an age of breathtaking cathedrals and brutal superstition, of chivalry and torture that somehow turned a collapsed Roman province into the civilization that would go on to conquer the globe. And almost everything you think you know about it is wrong too. That is the next story.